Hello everyone, this is Bambi coming to you from the great nation of Ireland. This is an introduction to the weekly Dartscast. They took the words darts and podcasts and mashed them together to create the word Dartscast. Kind of very clever when you think about it. Your fantastic hosts are Alex Moss and Burton DeWitt are joined by some very special guests, so it's well worth sticking around. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the weekly Dartscast, sponsored by Dartwolf. I'm Alex Moss, and joining me as always, although this is our first regular show together since the World Match Play, would you believe it, Darts statistician Burton DeWitt. How are you doing?
Yeah, I guess I'm joining you as always, but you're not joining me as always, since our producer fell in for you right after the World Match Play. But glad you're fully back. Glad we're finally going to be talking some darts instead of just hanging tight and talking about how we've been enjoying it offline. But yeah, I'm doing just fine. How are you, Alex?
Doing good, thank you. Good to be fully back this week. There's no Wi-Fi problems this end. There's been a fairly quiet last few weeks on the darts calendar, and as this is the first time we've had a proper chance for me to mention my own darting achievement from 4 weeks ago now, actually winning a match in a tournament. It's been a long time since I've done that, but plenty more darts to talk about, better darts than I was able to produce in that game. And we've got two guests calling in, two guests that have had very memorable weekends. Robert Grundy, one of the newest PDC title winners, who'll be calling in to look back on winning his first Challenge Tour event. Plus, we've got a player that maybe you'll be cheering on very soon, Burton, in World Championships and World Cups, if this past weekend is anything to go by. Stowe Buntz from America, the winner of all three CDC events held in Canada on Saturday and Sunday. He's going to be stopping by as well. But let's start the show with a look back at the World Series Down Under, and you teased it last week. Could we have Rob Cross appreciation minutes this week on the show? And that is exactly what we've got. We've got the Rob Cross appreciation minutes. Classy, crossy, to coin a phrase from Stuart Pike. He goes back to back Down Under, winning both the titles. Just how impressed were you with Rob Cross over the last two weekends?
I mean, I think you could say really over the last few months. It was a somewhat slow start to the year for Rob Cross, but I said I wasn't worried. I think you said you weren't worried. And that was because there was even though he hadn't been hitting his heights, it seemed like it was just, it was all there. He just wasn't performing at his best level enough. And that's why he was going out early in Players' Championship events. But it wasn't anything that I found early in the season that was concerning. I thought he was putting himself in position to win matches, and he just wasn't getting it done. And at some point it would start clicking. The week or 2 weeks after we said that, he won a Pro Tour. Later on, he won a Euro Tour. And now he's won back-to-back World Series events. And just the different levels that we've seen from him this weekend, I thought was really just noteworthy. You go back to, I shouldn't say this past weekend, these past 2 weekends. You go back to New Zealand. Okay, the first round, he didn't have to do much. Warren Perry didn't play as well as he has in the past when he's beaten MPG. And that's why Rob Cross was able to win that with an 82 average. But after that, he did what Nathan Aspinall had done in Blackpool. 95, 99, 98. That's the level you need to play at in order to give yourself a chance. And he did it. Yes, he had to get through in a last leg against an inspired Johnny Totten. We'll come on to him later. Yes, he had to get through in a last leg decider against the reigning world match play champion. But overall, Rob Cross played at a winner's level, and that's why he won that tournament. But then it was a different Rob Cross in the New South Wales Darts Masters the following weekend. You look, a couple of those matches were the same, but then he averaged nearly 110 in whitewashing Peter Wright in the semifinals. And in the final against Damon Hedda, who just ran out of steam, he put him away early and he never let him back in. Yes, it was only a 91 average. Yes, that's about as bad as we've seen from Damon Hedda, maybe ever. I mean, he won a World Series event before he was even on the Pro Tour 1 week after winning the top WDF or BDO event that was held down in Australia on the televised screen the week before. We saw that's when he emerged, and we've never seen Damon Hedda really play as poorly as he did in that final. Maybe he just ran out of steam. But Rob Cross never let him into that. Rob Cross, both when he was playing at his best and when he was playing not all that well, was still doing what he needed to win his match. And overall, that meant 8 match wins, 2 titles, 2 World Series events, £40,000, and 2 appreciation minutes. It was different levels. It was a consistency in New Zealand, and it was a dogged determination at times in Wollongong. And that's what led to him winning those 2 events. Rob Cross is still one of the best players in the world, whether he's ranked number 2 like he was a few years ago, or trying to see if he can stay in that top 5, 6, 7, 8 like he's trying to do at the back end of this year. He's still a player to be reckoned with. He's still a player that if he's in the field has as good a chance, or nearly as good a chance as anyone, of picking up the title. And now, just in the last few months, he's picked up 3 big stage titles, and he's won 4 titles overall this year, which is not something he has done in a year since his first year on tour. I'm really impressed with Rob Cross recently, and I think it's a sign of things to come. I think he is still one of the best players in the world. I wouldn't say he's in the top 4 in the world despite winning those 2 tournaments back to back. I still think it's the same big 4 that we've been saying all year, namely 3 of the top 4 in the rankings and Johnny Clayton, although Nathan Aspinall certainly has his name in that conversation, but so does Rob Cross. Rob Cross is just right there, waiting to break in, waiting to say that he is still one of the players, one of the best. Sorry, not just one of the best, but the best player in the world. He's in that second tier, and by winning back-to-back titles, he's put himself in position to try to break into that at the World Grand Prix, at the Grand Slam, at the Players' Championship Finals, some one of those events at the back end of the year, if not multiple of them.
Yeah, some really good points you make there, and I'm going to come on to that best in the world debate that you brought up there as well. But things are good for Rob Cross at the moment. You mentioned that he's won 3 titles on the stage this year. Could have perhaps been even more, couldn't it? He got to the final of the Masters at the start of the year. Speaking of the World Series, the one in America, I remember the semi-final that he had with Michael Van Gerwen, pushed him all the way, was very close to winning that game, and would have gone into the final against Jeff Smith as a big favourite in that. So 3 titles, could have perhaps been 4, 5, maybe even more. Even the World Match Play, okay, he went out in the first round, but you look at how he played in that game, the game that went to extra legs against the handicapper's nightmare, Dale Gurney, who had a good week in Blackpool. But he finished up with a 98 average. I think he was over 50% on the doubles. Didn't play too badly in that event and went out in the first round. But yeah, it's been 2 very good weeks for Rob Cross, winning both of those titles. And as you say, it's been a good year. It's been more ups than downs so far in 2023 from, as I mentioned, the final of the Masters, quarterfinals of the UK Open. He finally got that monkey off his back, winning a first Euro Tour title as well after all those close shaves in the final. And yeah, coming on to the debate about the best in the world, I think everyone knows the ability that Rob Cross has got. He can throw those big averages. You mentioned the 109 that he had this past weekend in that game against Peter Wright. Go back to the Masters again, he had, 112 in one game against Gary Anderson. Doing that on the big stage, there's not many players that are able to get to those levels, but Rob Cross is someone that can do that. He can mix it with the best, and I don't think it's a surprise when he goes and wins World Series events, even major events. And I think for us as followers, as fans of the game, we talk about the big 3, the big 4, the big 5, whatever the pool of players is that we class as the best in the world right now. It has been a little while since we've put Rob Cross's name in that category, and if he carries on going the way he's going, I don't think it's going to be too long before we are putting Rob Cross's name in that mix of the best players in the world at this current moment in time. And even when we come on to look ahead to the major events coming up, it's probably been a while as well since we've picked out Rob Cross as a predicted winner or put him amongst those first 3 or 4 names that you put as the leading contenders. You look at some of the results that he had over the 2 events, beat a lot of the top names as well. Gerwyn Price, who would have gone into those 2 events as a big favourite. I think Nathan Aspinall in the final, I've got to say I didn't watch much of the 2 events, but I think he was 5-2 down in that final against Nathan, came back and won it 8-7 in a decider. So you mentioned there about digging in deep at times to win some of these events, and that's what he did in that first event in the final. And I think the second event, we saw the confidence from that first win. It helped him kick on further. The first round in New Zealand wasn't the best performance. The one that you touched on against Warren Parry, below par average in that one. first round in Australia, picks up where he left off. He has that 98 average in round one. Then he beats Danny Noppert. Then he beats Peter Wright, the 109 average. And then 8-1 against Damon Heta in the final. Some very impressive performances there from Rob. And just lastly, you look at the history of these World Series events, and in particular, when the PDC do go down under, do go to New Zealand and Australia, it's not many times that we've seen players win 2 titles. I think it's just been Phil Taylor and Michael Van Gerwen that have done it. And to do it this year as well, when there's just been 2 events instead of the 3 that we've been used to, that takes an awful lot of doing. So I think for Rob Cross, the signs are good if you're him or you're one of his fans. And if you're a fan of the Appreciation Minute, we could be seeing a few more of them before the year's out.
Now, talked about the Rob Cross. He won both of those, the defeated finalists. And the second one was Damon Heta, and that helped the Australian number 1 lift the Kyle Anderson Trophy as the best of the Australian and New Zealand players over the 2 events these past 2 weeks. But of the other Australian and New Zealand players besides Heta, who caught your eye?
Yeah, I've got to say there was a few, and again, I just mentioned it a moment ago. I didn't see a lot of these events, so I'm just catching up on the results, looking at some of the stats and how the players performed. But we did have 4 players, I think a quick head count, 4 players from Australia and New Zealand that won matches across the 2 events. And I'll just briefly touch on Damon Heta because I want to give a mention to some of the other players. But he was the one that bumped up on the list to the PDC representatives after Johnny Clayton withdrew from the trip down under. But you go back 12 months ago, the 2022 World Series, it was the first time we had these events back on the calendar after 3 years because of the pandemic. And Damon Heta, he was returning as a tour card holder, a World Cup champion, a lot of success that he'd had since he'd made that big move over to England. And the trip ended up not the best for him darts-wise, 0 for 3, lost in the first round in all 3 of those events. And a couple of those events lost in last leg deciders to Gerwyn Price and Michael Smith, who played well. Both players played well on those occasions. But we know how much these trips mean to Damon Heta beyond the darts, getting to see some friends and family that he doesn't get to see very often. But I think he'll be very pleased this year to have gone back and got some wins under his belt. And just to mention that the 106 average that he had against Joe Comito, one of the guests that we had on a couple of weeks earlier for our World Series preview show, Joe mentioned that him and Damon used to be teammates when they lived together in Australia in the same team. Well, 106 average, 6-0, not the nicest teammate, is he? But aside from that, let's mention some of the other winners that we had. And one of the ones that I've got to mention straight away is Halpai Puha in the first event in New Zealand. Arguably his best ever performance on TV. We've seen him in quite a few of these World Series events, World Championships as well, but 96 average in that first round to beat Dimitri van den Berg. I think he'll take a lot from that performance, being able to produce that level on the stage. And again, I don't think we've seen him hit those numbers very often, if at all, before. So that's a big win for him. Player that you touched on earlier, Johnny Tartar as well, the truck driver. It was a night to remember for him, beating Peter Wright 6-3 in that first event, and then the next day just losing out in a decider to Rob Cross, who, as we know, went the whole trip unbeaten, so no shame in that. And then another player to win, Simon Whitlock, in the Australian event, 99 average to beat Nathan Aspinall 6-5. So again, good to see Simon putting in those levels, especially in an event which will mean more than most. And just want to lastly touch on a couple of players that didn't win, but got to say that they played pretty well. Ben Robb, 98 average. I mentioned Halpai a moment ago about how he probably put in one of his best performances on stage. Same's got to be said for Ben Robb as well. And okay, it's a defeat at the end of the day, but I think producing that level, again, it's something that Ben Robb can take a lot from. And we'll see if we can make the World Championship, or if he makes any more trips over to the UK, maybe a go at Q School further down the line. If you put in performances like that, that's going to give you that confidence to say, yes, I can do this, I can mix it with the best, and maybe this is my future one day. And just lastly, I want to give a mention to Darren Pennell as well, because didn't pick up a win. He did play in the 2 events. He is the DPA number 1. He's won 11 titles on that circuit this year. Lost 6-5 to Michael Smith in the first one, then to Peter Wright in the next one. Both high 80 averages. It was the first time that we've seen him on TV, and we're going to see him at Ali Pali at the end of the year. And I think, again, someone that is going to benefit from that big stage experience. And I've got to say, I'm looking forward to seeing him make that trip back to England and see how he does in that World Championship at the end of the year.
I might as well not answer. You said exactly what I was going to say. But I'll start with the player you ended with. And, there's two ways to look at Darren Penhall's match against Michael Smith. One is, Michael Smith wasn't on his best, and it wasn't the first time we've seen in the World Series Michael Smith be off his best. He went out first match in New York to the Canadian Jim Long. But the other way to look at it is Darren Penhall did what he needed to stay in that match. After Michael Smith went up 4-3, what did Penhall do? He threw a 15-darter on his throw to level the match. Michael Smith went up 5-4. What did Darren Penhall do? After Michael Smith missed a dart at bull for a 12-dart break for the match, Penhall hit the double first dart for a 13-dart leg, hold the throw to force the decider. The one thing he couldn't do was really get a very good look at Michael Smith's throw. And he had chances because Smith had holds of 17, 19 darts in that match. And just one good leg against the throw could have swung that the other way, and very likely would have, because I don't think Darren Penhall would have buckled under the pressure of throwing for the match the way he was playing. He just couldn't find it when he needed to against the throw. But still, going against the world number one world champion and to pull out legs of 15 and 13 darts with your back against the wall deserves more credit than I think it was given by the average person, because he ended up losing the match. And I thought it was worth giving him a special mention, even though he didn't win. But beyond that, the players who did win, I can't disagree with them. I mean, obviously, Damon Hedda, he won a match both times, made it to the final. Yeah, as I said earlier, he didn't have his best in the final, but overall played wonderfully across the 2 weekends, and that's why he deservedly won the Kyle Anderson Trophy. Haupaipoa couldn't follow up that brilliant win against Dimitri Vandenberg against Nathan Aspinall, regressed significantly, but it shows the type of player he is capable of being. We've seen him play the Challenge Tour before. If he does go and give it another go in the future, I think he has the game. And he's not the only New Zealand player who has the game. We've seen Cody Harris in the past come over and nearly win a tour called multiple times. But Haupaipoa is another one of those players. Beyond that, you mentioned Ben Robb, the highest losing average of the players from down under. Also a good performance in New Zealand. But overall, I mean, I think we see it before. We've seen it. We're going to see it again. I think overall, the Australian and the New Zealand players, because of their tour for so long being so good, have historically been the top players to contend against in the World Series. But we're starting to see that change. We saw a couple of the North American players win. We saw Jeff Smith have a great run. Obviously, when there's been World Series events in Germany, Gabriel Clemens made the final, but we're starting to see other tours match up, and I think that's why it cut down to just 2 events. Yes, Australia can handle 2 events on its own, plus the event in New Zealand. The crowds will go, the fans will go, and the quality will be there. But we're seeing now in North America and the Nordic Tour and other places, even Bahrain had one of their players average 98 and 99 in his 2 matches of the World Cup. There's quality everywhere, and as those players perform, it's going to put more pressure on these Australian and New Zealand players to lift their games, to remain the best circuit, global circuit outside the PDC, and to perform with fewer events to do it. And maybe that's why we didn't see as many go deep this time. But they have 2 players on tour, well, 3 if you can count Corey Cadby, and with one of those players, Damon Hedda, he is a superstar.
Well, that was our look back at the World Series Down Under. We're going to be back in a moment to look back at the Challenge Tour, which took place over the weekend, and also look ahead to the World Youth Championship, which takes place this Sunday. But before then, let's hear from one of the winners on the weekend on the Challenge Tour. Here's our chat with Robert Grundy. I'm pleased to say I'm joined by one of the newest winners on the PDC Challenge Tour, Robert Grundy. Thanks for the time, Robert. How are you doing?
I'm brilliant, thank you. Still a bit on cloud 9, but yeah, I'm still over the moon for what I've done over the weekend.
Great to hear it. Yeah, there is only one place to start. Take you back to Saturday afternoon in Milton Keynes, winning Challenge Tour 17, your first PDC title. What was that moment like when the double went in and you'd won the final?
Everything you dream of. Obviously, I've been playing a lot of years, and literally once that double 4 went in, it was just so exciting and just couldn't believe it, really. But yeah, brilliant.
And that title was right in the middle of the Challenge Tour weekend, the third of 5 events. You were back playing your first match in the next event, I think less than 30 minutes later. So how difficult was it to come back down from that high as well?
Oh, brilliant. It was chalk and cheese. The first, I think it was the leg of the next game. My heart was still racing, and I was still, to be there, I think I was still thinking about it. And plus, one of my good friends who I actually know from my area, from Middlesbrough. So yeah, it was very hard. It was tough, but I'm glad I got through it. But yeah, it's hard when you only have literally a few minutes to prepare for the next game. But that's that, isn't it? It's what I'm here for.
Yeah, I mean, you got a few wins in that next event, getting to the last 16, and you had an early exit in the one event on the Sunday. So what was the journey like heading home at the end of the weekend, reflecting on, I'm guessing, was the biggest title of your darts career so far?
Oh, yeah. I think I still missed a few opportunities before I won. I think it was the game before. Number 16, I think. And I thought I missed a bit of an opportunity. I didn't play well in one game, and then I was out. So to win it, the next one was obviously over. I was over the moon with that. And then it's just obviously after that, it's obviously fatigue kicked in a little bit, and but on the journey home, I was over the moon. To win one, it didn't matter if I went out first round in every single one, and then won one, I'd still be over the moon, because it's the first time I've ever done it, and it's it's one of those dreams where it came to reality, and it was just amazing.
Yeah, definitely. And that title has helped to make a name for yourself this summer. You've also been playing on the Modus League as well. A lot of darts fans will have seen you play on that. But let's circle back to the very start for you in darts. You mentioned earlier that you've been playing the game for a long time. So how did you first get introduced to the game?
I was in a pub practicing when I was really young, and I think I was about 16, just coming up to 17, and just two guys just came up to me while I was just chucking up, and said, "Do you fancy joining our team?" And Paul, I just never looked back. I played for a team for quite a lot of trophies with them, locally, and then obviously career just built, and then ended up playing county. But I played county for a couple of years, but then work started calling. I just needed money, obviously for the family, because obviously started having a family with kids. So I had, I think it was about 10 years out of darts, and then I was working away all the time, and come back, I had a couple of years playing again, and then the same again. I had another 5 years out, just because where the money was, basically where the work was. And then now I'm back. I met a great guy who sponsored me now in Dex Property Services, and he's transformed it. I work for him. He literally pays for everything, and all the fruits is starting to come through, and this is what I'm over the moon.
Well, we can definitely see that. And you mentioned about your family as well. Your Twitter profile says that you've got 6 children, 1 grandchild as well, which I'm sure has been keeping you busy. So what was it that gave you the push to give Q School a go in January? Was it having that backing from the sponsors to go and give it a go?
Oh yeah. It's always been with me. It's always, if I haven't. I've got all the time in the world, but it's, yourself, when you want to do something, just I didn't have the money. And then when I had a job, I was working away, so I just didn't have the time. So it was 22, where this now it's a what I call a 9 to 5 job. It's during the day. I work weekends, which most comps are on a week, so it doesn't affect anything. So with a sponsor, it's absolutely changed my life, changed everything. I'm stable at home, and then he gives me that freedom to go to any tournament I want, so it's absolutely brilliant.
Good to hear. And looking at your results from Q School at the start of the year, I think you ended up being only 1 win, 1 point off from getting through stage 1 and to the final stage. So how did you reflect on that first taste of Q School back at the start of this year?
Oh, I was gutted. I knew I like, if I played, I knew I could, like I am now. I could have sort of qualified for the weekends, but obviously I didn't. But I was gutted. Obviously, I've just got better and better and better. And the difference is, when I first started doing the Q School, I was a little bit nervous as well, because it's like, I've done comps and stuff, but nothing. I've never done nothing in that like that. So to do that and then to fall just a little bit off, it was a bit down, like heartbreaking a little bit. But it's. I think it's set me up a little bit better for this year. And like I say, every challenge tour, I've just got better and better and better. I've goals, and every goals I've done. So it's amazing, absolutely amazing.
Yeah, you certainly picked yourself up from that disappointment of Q School. You went on to play on the Challenge Tour. The third weekend, you had 2 runs to the quarterfinals, and both of those quarterfinals you lost out in a last leg decider, so close to going even further. So how much confidence did those 2 runs give you to say that a title could be on the cards a little bit down the line?
The 2 guys when I got beat in the quarterfinals was obviously Chris Landman was the first one, which is absolute. He was on fire and then brilliant, and the other one was obviously Van, and he's at the top. And to be fair, when I played them, I just went in with no fear, and I 4-2 up in both of them. And then obviously things happen, missed a few doubles, and then you end up losing, but that starts. And then I took that so good, because I thought, well, I'm 4-2, and I was absolutely what I call play really well, and I can beat them, and then just to lose out, it's stand me in good stead. And everything I've done, it's helped me along the way.
Yeah, and before we come on to the weekend, the 4th Challenge Tour weekend just gone, you did have that debut in the Modus League, and we know there's various ways of getting into that, performing well in events. Some players, they just get invited outright. So how did your place in the field come about?
I just got an email from them and saying, I'm available. I think it's because I've had a few local tournaments, and I've played really, really well, and I've just went on there and given me all, and just come up short with 1 leg to qualify the semi-final, which was another bit of heartbreaking, but I just can't wait. And every time I do something a second time, touch wood, and that I always do 1 or 2 things better. So hopefully next call up and basically go on and do it, hopefully win it, and fight for the Champions Week. So yeah,
so a good trend to have, and fair to say that week in the Modus League as well, you caught the eye, particularly with your darts. Some were calling you a trendsetter, some describing your darts as Arsene Wenger darts, after the former Arsenal manager has used very small stems. So just talk us through that setup and how you came to play with those very short stems.
Well, when I first started, it was like what most people are using now, the long barrels. But with me throw, when I was, because I used to pull it right back to my face, and when I used to put new flights on, I would clip me chin, so it would put me off, because I'm rubbing like my chin because it's bleeding. So I started just getting smaller and smaller, and then in the end I noticed those micro stems, and I thought, well, I'll give that a go, and then it's absolutely been brilliant. It's not in me thought that it's going to hit me chin, but since then I've sort of changed me throw a little bit, like I've shortened how far I come back anyway, but I've kept the stems because that's what I'm used to. And people say I do get a lot of bounce outs and stuff with the equipment I use, but when they go and well, to go, so I can't really complain.
Yeah, I was going to say as well, obviously the Challenge Tour events, they're not streamed. We don't get to see any of the darts here, but I was going to ask, did you use that setup at the weekend as well?
Yeah, so I use the same setup. I use my 23 gram darts with a little micro stems, flights. Everyone says it looks a little bit weird. Obviously, I've got quite big hands and the dart's quite small, but the way I hold the dart, it's perfectly in my hands. So, yeah, hopefully that setup will win me a few more titles along the way.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure there's manufacturers out there as well queuing up to maybe put out a set of your own darts with those micro stems as well. And let's circle back to that title on Saturday, because you were breaking new ground, making the semi-finals, then getting to the final where you play a former world champion, the player second on that Order of Merit, Christian Kiss. So how are you feeling as you warmed up to play that final?
I just tried not to think of it, because if I started thinking, obviously I know who he is and I've watched him, but I thought if I start thinking of him, it'll make me nervous and I won't play my game. So I focused on trying to do what I'm good at and not worry about what he does. So I was just concentrating on basically trying to hit that treble 20 as much as I can, and when I get my chances, take them. But yeah, I know that I think he's won an event as well, so I know he's playing really well. So to beat him 5-2 was an amazing feeling. It really was.
Yeah, it's a great win, and you said on Twitter after the weekend, reflecting on the win, not bad for an old man from Hartlepool. Well, we know that age in darts is just a number, so what are the aspirations for you in darts? What do you think you can go on to achieve now?
Hopefully to be a professional at the end of the day. That's what everyone at the Challenge Tour wants to do. Obviously, they only give out a very low amount of cue cards, so it's basically you need to be playing at your peak to have any chance of playing. And hopefully, I've been playing really well all this year, so hopefully I can keep this form going. And I think I'm only in my B gear, so hopefully I get into A, and then and do some damage and hopefully get the cue card. That's my aspiration. I think as well as when I do play so-called professional, like ex-professionals or better players, it's out my game. It's all about concentration. If I get my head, because I know how good that opponent is, normally I raise my game. So hopefully that's what I just have to keep on doing. Just keep practicing and get those doubles in, because sometimes they do go a bit missing. But
yeah, we can all relate to that, and well, it's a great aim to have, to be a professional, and your titles put you up to 12th on that Challenge Tour Order of Merits. There's plenty to play for going into that last weekend of the season in October, but before then maybe we could see you get a call up for the Players Championship events. Have you had a call up yet? Do you think it's going to go down the list to 12th, or have you just got your phone on loud in case you do get that call?
I'd love to. I've never. Obviously, I got a call up for the Pro Tour, and that's the closest I've been. But that's not like a tournament like that. But if I could get that, yeah, that'd be amazing. And I think it doesn't matter. I mean, if I got there, and it doesn't matter who I got, if it was one of the top big boys, I give them a fright. If I don't win, I give them a real fright. So hopefully, yeah. I mean, that's why I think it's helped me when I got that Pro Tour call up, and I played Barneveld twice. It was such a down to earth. It was hard to explain. It's like he's a legend of the sport, and I've played him. I got him second round the first day, first round the second day. So it was a real eye-opening experience. It was brilliant. Hopefully more of them to come as well.
Yeah, fingers crossed you'll get a chance again before the end of the year. And beyond that, the Challenge Tour concludes the last weekend in October. What else have you got your eye on darts-wise for the rest of 2023 now? It sounds like you're going to get another shot at the Modus at some point.
Yeah, hopefully, yeah, definitely. Hopefully, and then do a lot better. Northeast way, there's a few quite biggish local comps that I'm going to. The ones at Cleveland Open Festival. So there's a couple of locals. Obviously the Challenge Tour in October. I'm just hoping to try and keep busy, because obviously it's one of them where there's not that many tournaments up here in December and that. So to keep and then go into, say, January for Q School, it's really tough. So hopefully it's match practice you need, and hopefully I just try and get as much as I can so I can try and fill my potential.
Definitely. And lastly, before we let you go away from the darts, we see from your social media that you're a Liverpool FC fan. We're only one game into the season, but how do you think the Reds are going to do this year?
Well, hopefully, if they stop messing about with buying midfielders, I think we still do okay. I think it's still going to be City, but back in my mind, I still hope Liverpool can do it again.
We shall see. Well, I was tempted to ask you the question: Liverpool to win the league, or you to get a tour card, but I think I know what the answer would be.
Oh, me to get a tour card all day long.
Good man.
And hopefully they'll get in touch with me. They go and show them.
Well, Robert, it's an absolute pleasure to get you on the show. Thanks for getting back to us. We appreciate the time, and congratulations on the title at the weekend, and we wish you all the best for what else is to come in 2023 as well.
Oh, no, thanks. No, I thank you as well. Thanks very much.
Attention all dart enthusiasts, this is ZR, your host from In the Mud Sports, and I have an exciting announcement for you. Are you ready to take your darting experience to the next level? Introducing In the Mud Sports, the premier online darts league for amateurs like yourself. We're not your typical darts league, it's an experience like no other. It's where you can showcase your skills, make new friends, and have an absolute blast. We have a vibrant community where camaraderie is key and darts meets pure enjoyment. Whether you're a singles player or love the excitement of team events, In the Mud Sports has got you covered. We are perfect for amateurs who want to have fun and improve their game along the way. It is your time to shine. Don't miss out on this incredible opportunity to elevate your darting experience and join 80 plus players from all around the world. Together we'll create unforgettable moments on and off the oche. You can catch all updates about where we are going live next through Twitter and Instagram at In the Mud Sports. See you guys there.
Thanks again to Robert for joining us. Now let's have our own look back at the Challenge Tour weekend. 5 events, 5 different winners in Milton Keynes. We had the World Masters champion Wesley Placier, Daryl Pilgrim, Robert Grundy, who you've just heard from, Cameron Crabtree and Owen Bates, all lifting titles on the Challenge Tour at the weekend. Surprisingly, none of the winners was named Berry Van Peer, who still has that big lead going into the final weekend in a few months' time. But whose title win was it the most important for heading into the last weekend in October?
I mean, I think all of them, especially Crabtree, Bates, and Placier, because they're the ones really contending for potentially a tour card and a world championship spot. But I think all of them obviously getting a title is huge. We start with Daryl Pilgrim, who's currently the furthest down the rankings of all those players, but he's the player who's top of the averages in the Challenge Tour this year. And we're recording on Tuesday. What did Daryl Pilgrim do earlier today before we recorded? He averaged 118 in a losing effort in the Modus League. And obviously you're going to regress from a 118. Oh, wait, no, he didn't. He upped it to 122 the next match. He's a phenomenal player, and now he has a Challenge Tour title to boot. It's probably too much for him to make up the ground from here. Although, I mean, if he has a weekend like Barry Vampire did the previous weekend, he will. But it's probably too much for him to make up, to get into the top two, to get a tour card, to get into the World Championships. But it puts himself in a position that he's going to be one of the players to fear at Q School next year, assuming he goes, because, well, he should be one of the players to fear. But for the other players, especially Crabtree, Bates, and Plessier, it's important because it keeps them in that race. And yes, Christian Kiss did not win a title. He's currently second, but he did everything but win a title. He made a final. He made a semifinal. He kept his lead, even though it did shrink a little bit, because he still put those 1,500 pounds on the ranking through those other events, through that semifinal and the final. And he kept pushing the other players to win. So they needed to win those titles to catch up a little bit on Kiss, but more than anything, just to keep pace with him. And Plessier, it wasn't just a title; it was also a final in the last event as well. So he drove himself back into contention, and maybe that means for him it was the most important because it came at the beginning of the weekend. It came in that first event, and it suddenly lifted him from well back to still with work to do, but suddenly one good day, one good event, and he was right back in that race. He got that second final on Sunday, losing to Owen Bates, but by getting to that final, by getting another 1,000 pounds or so on his ranking, now suddenly he's within a title of Christian Kiss. He's back in the race. So I think for him, maybe the argument is that he had the most important title because it drew him into the competition with 4 events to go that weekend. And it gave him some more motivation to push on, despite everyone, obviously by Sunday, the 5th event being tired, to make sure that he can close the gap even further. And that's what he did. But for Crabtree and Bates, it was to keep pace with Kiss. For Kiss, even though he didn't win the title, it was to keep the pressure on everyone else to chase him. I think it's set up for a phenomenal final weekend. Yes, Barry Vampire's well out ahead, but there's a dozen players who still are right there with a chance. If they do what Wesley Plessier did, in fact, if they did what he did, it's in fact 14 players who are in with a chance with a title and a final. And, well, Wesley Plessier showed that is possible. So I think it's going to be a great end to the season. And who knows, maybe even Daryl Pilgrim will go and pull a Barry Vampire and win 3 titles. In which case, then in retrospect, the answer should be him. It was most important to him if he does go and do that. And as I said, he's good enough to do it.
Well, just want to touch on one of the things you said there. Daryl Pilgrim, top of the averages. It's not like him, is it, to be top of an average list on Dark Connect? But no, in all seriousness, looking back at the weekend and to those winners that we had, 3 of them, it was the first PDC title that they've won. So I'm guessing for those 3 as a standalone event, you take out the order of merit, the overall standings of how the season's gone, those players adding their name to the winner's circle in the PDC. That's a big achievement. And you heard from one of those 3 players earlier, Robert Grundy. When we're recording this, we haven't spoken to him yet, but I'm assuming the chat that we do end up having with him, and you'll have heard from him a few moments ago that he was very pleased to win that title of the weekend, and that title's pushed him up to 12th on the order of merit. Still the best part of another title off that second place. So 5 events to go. He's got some work to do to break into that top 2. But I think looking beyond the race for Ali Pali, the tour card spots, you look at what getting into the top 8 of the Challenge Tour can do. It gets you into the UK Open next year. Even before then, you've got the Players' Championship events coming up. We've got them coming back next week. We could see Robert Grundy. Maybe it might go down to 12th on that list. He could get a call up to play in some of those Pro Tour events, get to experience playing in Players' Championship events before that final Challenge Tour weekend comes around. And again, it depends how many tour card holders decide not to enter. We know there's going to be at least 2 based on the year so far. You'd expect a few more as well. Maybe some of those players that played in the World Series maybe want a little bit more of a holiday before the real business end of the season starts to pick up. But yeah, we could see Robert get that chance in the Players' Championship. So that's a big thing for him if he does get it. And sticking with the first-time winners before moving back to the other 2 that won their second Challenge Tour titles of their career. You mentioned Darryl Pilgrim. Again, what he's done on the Modus League today when we're recording this. He's a player that we've seen throw in some big averages before. He topped the Players' Championship averages in 2022. Okay, he only played 1 match, but he did get a mug for it from the Darting Nerd. I was having a look earlier. He didn't actually play the 3rd weekend of the Challenge Tour. I'm not sure if it was a clash with the Modus or something else why he didn't play in that. But you'd think if he had have played in it, he would be a lot higher than he is right now in 15th place. So there's going to be some work for him to do in that final weekend. But he's proven to himself that he can win these titles now. If he can go in and win one of the first 2 or first 3 in that weekend, then could be all to play for going into those last couple of events. And you look at how important, and I've said it before, winning these finals on the Challenge Tour, Development Tour, whatever system it is, are given the big gap there is in the prize money. $2,500 for winning a title. If you get to a final, it's only $1,000. And especially you look at someone like Scott Mitchell, he's lost in 3 finals this year. If he'd have won 1 or 2 of them, he would be right in contention for that top 2 going into the last weekend. And just lastly, those other 3 players, the last of the first-time winners at the weekend, Owen Bates, it's catapulted him up to 4th within a final of the top 2. And the same with Cam Crabtree, second title of the year. He's 3rd, only a last 16 run now off Christian Kist in that 2nd spot. So I think the answer for me is going to be those 2. It is going to be Owen and Cam, just because they are now so close to Christian Kist and that 2nd spot, the last one for the tour card and Ali Pally. And Wesley Placey, the other player that I haven't mentioned until now, the reigning world master, been a bit of a hit and miss year for him on the Challenge Tour. You look at the 19 events so far, I think it was 9 of them that he's not cashed in. So almost half the events he's not put any money on the board. And you mentioned it there, the weekend he had winning a title and then the last event getting to a final. That's a big weekend for him. But I think he's still got quite a bit to do. I think he needs the best part of another title if he's going to catch Christian Kist. So maybe not as close as the other 2. So for me, the answer to this is going to be Owen Bates and Cam Crabtree. Those titles have put them right in the mix going into the last weekend.
Well, speaking of the last weekend, it's not yet the last weekend for the Challenge Tour, but this upcoming weekend will be the last weekend season 2023 for the PDC Development Tour. Luke Littler and Wessel Neiman currently in strong positions for the tour cards. Currently, if you look at the Challenge Tour, Development Tour order of merit, they're 2nd and 3rd. Jean Van Veen, of course, 1st, but he's on the first year of a 2-year tour card, and the way he's playing first year of many, many years to come on tour if he keeps this up. But that means Luke Littler and Wessel Neiman would currently win the tour card. A bit of a gap after them down to Nathan Rapinoe and Dylan Slevin and others who are in the chase pack. But let's talk about Sunday, because that's the day that the World Youth Championship is played down to the final. The final, of course, will be at Minehead in November. Josh Rock, since he's in the top 32 in the world, to try to defend his title. Do you think he'll even make it to Minehead?
Well, I think he's going to be going there to play in the Players' Championship finals, but the World Youth Championship, it's a tough one, isn't it? And I think Josh Rock, he has got a fight on his hands to defend that title. History would say it's something that hasn't happened very often, defending the World Youth Championship in the PDC. Only Dimitri van den Berg has won back-to-back titles, and the only other player to reach back-to-back finals, I think, was Michael van Gogh in the first couple of years that this event was put on. But we are talking about a player in Josh Rock. We've spoke about him a lot over the last 18 months. He is one of the fastest rising stars in the game. You look at the major events, you look at the odds going into them, and Josh Rock, even though he's not got to a quarter final yet of a major event, he is right up at the top of that list with the big 4, the big 5 players as favourites going into those events. That shows you the high regard that he keeps in the world of darts in such a short space of time. And you look at how he performed in the World Youth Championship last year, and okay, we've only had Dart Connect for the last 5 or 6 years, so it's difficult to go back and look at the early years of this competition. But you look at what Josh did last year before getting to the final, and I'll touch on that in a moment, but averages of 92, 96, 95, 95, 99, 98 to make the final. And then in the final at Minehead, that 104 record average to win the title. If he brings that game to the tournament this Sunday when it's played down to the final, he's going to be very hard to beat. But I think it is an interesting factor going into this weekend is that what's the level of match practice going to be like for him? Because as we know, he's in the top 32, not eligible anymore to play on the development tour. All the other players in this field, they will have played Friday, they would have played Saturday, so they'll be more match sharp. On the flip side, what's the fatigue levels going to be like for them going into that Sunday when it is the World Youth Championship, and especially the players that are in that race for Tour Cards World Championship spots, the mental fatigue more than anything going into that final day on the Sunday. So it's an interesting dilemma going into the weekend. Is it more in favour of Josh being more fresh, or is it more in favour of the other players that have played against all the rest of the field of the players all year and over the last couple of days going into it? Because there's a lot of quality in this field. You look at players that you mentioned there, Jan van Veen, top of the list, Luke Littler, who we've spoke about quite a bit, Wessel Nyman on his comeback this year, looking to get that tour card, get to Ali Pally, and other players in there as well, players that have got tour cards, Dylan Slevin, Keane Barry, Adam Gavlas, Nathan Rafferty, the list goes on. So I think we are in for an exciting day of darts on Sunday, following it on Dart Connect. Again, this is something I put on Twitter earlier. It'd be great to see this event maybe added to the streaming list to see a bit more of it on that Sunday before we get to the final. But I think in terms of Josh Rock, I don't think you can back against him. I think he is going to go in as the player to beat, given the pedigree that he's built up over the last 18 months, the rise that he's had in the pro ranks. But it is going to be an extremely tough day for him, and you look to potential opponents he could have in those latter rounds, quarterfinals, semi-finals. He could be going up against Jan van Veen, Luke Littler. They are going to be extremely tough games. But I think if I was to answer this, I'm going to back Josh Rock to get to the final, and I'm just hoping that we do get a very exciting final. We could maybe get a Josh Rock, Luke Littler, depending on how the seedings work for this event, but getting two of those 4 or 5 players against each other in Minehead, we could be on for one of the most eagerly anticipated finals that we've ever seen in this tournament.
I think a lot here depends on what Josh Rock shows up on Sunday. And it's a bit of a weird thing to say after the first year and change that we saw him on tour, because it didn't matter which Josh Rock showed up. Was he going to be great, or was he going to be better than great? But granted, his first few months, he was averaging 104, 105 every match and losing to Simon Whitlock somehow. But now that he's, averaging 104, 105 and winning, we just expect that he is by far the best player here. Maybe Jan van Veen being the one player, and Luke Littler, even when Josh Rock is on his game, currently has the game to threaten him. But the last couple months have been a little bit different for the first time for Josh Rock. For the first time, some questions can be asked about where exactly his game is. I don't think it's a long-term thing to be concerned about. I think he is a future world champion. And I know we say that about a decent number of people, but there aren't that many that we've only seen for a year and a half that we already are calling a future world champion. I feel confident saying that about Josh Rock. I do not think he's going to regress. I think he really is the complete package. But at some point, he needs to learn how to lose. He needs to learn how to go through a spell where he's not playing at his best and having to eke out results despite that. And maybe the last couple months are the first time that we're seeing that. And we're going to see how long it takes him to adjust and get back and progress to that next level, even beyond where he already is. If you look at those last couple months, if you look at June and July, 10 Players' Championship matches, 8 of those 10 were below his seasonal average. And the 2 that were above were only a couple points above. 4 of the 8 were more than 4 points below his average. So nearly half of those 10 matches, he was a full level below what he had been doing on a seasonal average. And Blackpool as well was below his seasonal Pro Tour average. Granted, during that time he was in a Euro Tour event where he averaged 107 and 101. So, when we saw him on the big stage for 2 of those 3 times, he was still performing very, very well. But there were quite a few performances in those Players' Championship events that just weren't up to snuff for him. And it's the first time that I've really seen that from him over 2 weekends, 10 matches. He still, granted, won 6 of those 10 matches. That's how good he is. Even when he's not at his best, he is still winning against more than half the people who are thrown at it. And on the development tour, that will be even higher. And again, that was now over or nearly a month ago, actually slightly over a month ago, where those last of those matches were. So we haven't seen him at that time. Maybe he's found his game again. Maybe he's back confident playing at his best. But there are question marks, and there are enough players who are good enough on their game to beat him if they draw brings them up before the semifinal. Before the final. So when the semifinals are earlier. And likely he will have to play. Maybe it'll be Luke Littler. Maybe it'll be Jan van Veen. Maybe it'll be Wessel Neiman. Someone like that in that semifinal or even quarterfinal. And that could change things. If he's back to his best, he is the heavy favorite. And as you jokingly said at the beginning, he'll be in my head anyway because he'll be in the Players' Championship final. But I think there's just enough questions over his head that he might be more vulnerable than we might otherwise think. But I'm not going to bet against him. He is the best player in this field, and he's the best player in this field by a country mile, whether you're talking Northern Ireland or England or wherever country you're in.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see which 2 players make the World Youth Championship. We're going to find out on Sunday. We're going to come back in a moment with some listener questions, just as I see that Colchester United are bottom of League 2. Let's forget about that. Here's our chat with a winner from the weekend. He won 3 out of 3 titles on the CDC Tour. Here's our chat with Stowe Buntz. I'm pleased to say I'm joined by a man who won 3 out of 3 titles on the CDC Tour at the weekend. Stowe Buntz, thanks for the time, Stowe. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. A little exhausted from the trip home from Canada and sitting in the airport now, currently heading to Florida for another dart tournament.
Yeah, I was going to say, we're catching you at the airport. You're waiting to board a flight, and you've kindly fitted us in for a chat after what was a busy weekend. So what is the darts that you're going to be playing in this weekend?
It's going to be the DPFL Live Championships in Orlando, Florida.
Very nice. Well, we've got to start our chat with the weekend just gone, making history, and Peter Satira, the boss of the CDC, said in his post-match chat with you that you're the first player ever to do the threepeat in one of these weekends. Has it fully sunk in yet what you achieved at the weekend?
Sunk in yet? Yeah, a little. I talked about in one of the interviews, always being the bridesmaid, never the bride. I've had last year in Canada, matter of fact, on Saturday, with the 2 events on Saturday, I ran both of those events to the finals, losing one to Danny Baggish and losing the other one to Jim Long. So I've been running deep into the CDC tournaments for a regular. I knew I had the capability. I didn't do anything different this tournament. Actually, if anything, there was a bunch of luck on my side. There were some darts that individuals should have hit to do me in to finish the match out, and they missed, and I was able to put together some good finishing and keep myself in the game.
Yeah, we'll come on to talk about those events at the weekend, but what has the phone been like? I mean, even after the first title on Saturday, I'm sure it would have blown up, but to then win 2 more, come away with all 3 titles, has the phone stopped going off yet with messages?
It finally has, believe it or not. Late last night, I haven't received any messages since about 8 o'clock last night. So I think the phone, I think Facebook Messenger, I think emails, it's finally all settled down. And it's don't get me wrong, I am blessed to be overwhelmed with all the congratulations and great job. It was a great feeling to know I had that many supporters in my background supporting me and cheering me on.
Yeah, it's great to hear. And we did see that you managed to fit in a quick FaceTime with Danny Baggish. It was a very brief call, though. Tell us how that call went.
Actually, that was the second of the 2 calls. He FaceTimed my wife. We were using her phone because I was not getting service in Canada. So we talked for about 20 minutes. He gave me some amazing words of encouragement. He actually gave me words of encouragement back in first Indiana stop this year. Danny and I have had a long 20-year relationship of knowing each other through the darts. Obviously, he took the sport for North America, put it on his shouldars and excelled, and paved the path for the rest of us to be able to do the same thing. And that's awesome. And we chit-chatted. We had some laughs. And then we were actually still in the Airbnb we were at, me and the people I was staying with, and we were celebrating. So I told my wife, grab her phone, let's video chat Danny again, and I was holding the 3 trophies. And I looked at him, and he laughed, he smiled, and I said, all right, have a good one. And that's kind of how that conversation went. We had a few, like I said, we had about a 20-minute great words. He congratulated me once. He told me how he had always had faith in me. It was great. So that's how that one went.
Good times. Well, before we look back at the weekend in a bit more detail, let's go back to the very start for you in darts, and for some of our listeners who might not have heard of you before you had the weekend that you just did. So where did it all start for you in darts? How did you get introduced to the game?
Believe it or not, a gentleman that I knew as a teenager growing up was into darts, and I didn't really know what darts was other than there was a board at the local bar. I was dating a young lady that he was dating a friend of hers, and he had told me he just got back from Vegas and played in the Cricket Nationals. So he played in the Cricket Nationals, had took first place, and was explaining to me how darts was and how they had leagues. So I said, hey man, I'll come up and have a beer with you and check it out. And I did. And he gave me a set of his old darts that he was using. I think they were Golden Eagles, as a matter of fact. And I threw with him a couple times, and he said, man, you're pretty consistent for never playing the game. You should probably play in one of these leagues. So a couple months went by, and I did. I played in one of the leagues and started to get better, obviously, learning the game, learning how it's played, understanding outs, understanding why you shoot some of the things you shoot at. And then I got picked up on a few other league teams and started going to tournaments. I didn't even know what a tournament was. My first ever tournament was in Philly. I had the pleasure of losing to Darren Young and Paul Lim in the men's doubles semifinals, and I had an opportunity to beat him. I shot my first ever 180 in that match against him. I remember it like it was yesterday. And afterwards, everybody's like, "Oh man, right there, great job." To me and my doubles partner at the time, and I was a little upset I lost, and they were like, "Hey, well, you just lost to." I think they were both number 1 or number 2 or 1 and 3 in the country at the time in the ADO rankings. And I thought to myself, well, man, if I could have just beat them, there's no reason I can't be 1 or 3. Well, yeah, so I did the ADO circuit for a couple of years, and Ray Carver, Johnny K, Darren Young, Paul Lim, John Park, them guys used to beat me up religiously. So.
And you mentioned the ADO circuit these days, of course, in North America. When we look at the darts circuit, the big thing in town now is the CDC, and we've seen you get onto the CDC tour, playing those events. What were those first events like, testing yourself against the best from North America and adjusting to this new circuit that's on the scene now?
The competition, for the most part, I played all of them. At some way, shape, fashion, or form, whether it had been ADO, ADA, bull shooter. I played against the top players in North America. What took me a little while to get used to was the long format. Long format was something that wasn't common here. A lot of stuff here was best of 3, maybe best of 5, randomly, but for the most part, it was best of 3. So going, best of 7, best of 9, best of 11, best of 13, that started to really take a toll on me. Obviously, it's more time on your legs, more time on your arm, more time standing up. You just got to get used to it mentally, physically, emotionally, and so that took me a little getting used to. But the competition, the one thing I do love about it is, when you walk into a CDC event, everyone on that floor is a top player in North America. Every one of them has the capability to go be the next world champion, in my opinion. The talent in the floor events at the CDC is just amazing. It's awesome. I mean, great feeling. It's I can't. There's really no words to describe it, and it's awesome.
Well, yeah, you mentioned getting used to playing in the longer formats, pretty long formats when you get through to the final, first to 7 legs. You mentioned earlier you got to a couple of finals last September of last year. Then we come on to this year, got to another final as well. But I think the third final, the first one this year, some big averages on the way there as well. I was looking 95, 96, a 99 to beat Danny Baggish in the semi-final. So even though you were missing out on those titles, how much confidence were those runs, those performances giving you that one day you were going to get that title?
Oh, definitely. They were, again, every time I've gotten semifinals, finals, I was in my, putting up big numbers, like you said, in the 90s, and feeling I was right there. I was right on the cusp. Obviously, I think Peter talked about it, having my finishing, my double percentage being up around the 62, 63% is what made a difference. My scoring wasn't as heavy this past tournament, but I was finishing on first or second dart usually when I got to an out. And that was, I think that was the critical and crucial part of my game this past weekend, was the grittiness and the grind to be able to hit those outs when I most certainly had to, because they were just, my scoring wasn't there. I mean, the 20s, if you go watch how I played, 20s was not a friend of mine on Friday, so I abandoned it quick, and I stuck with 19s pretty much for the remainder of the tournament, and it paid out for me. I was able to score pretty decently with the 19s, but my finishing was top notch in my opinion.
Yeah, so a good point that you make there. I remember you mentioning that about switching to the 19s. It paid off for you at the weekend. We'll come on to that weekend in a moment, but a semi-final last month as well. Again, you're putting in some big numbers in the matches, and then we come on to this past weekend in Toronto. If someone would have said to you before you made the trip that you'd go 15-0, win all 3 titles, what would you have said to them?
I'd have said that is almost impossible, if not impossible. With the gentlemen, just like I said, the people in the room, Jules putting up 116 and 114 averages. I would have thought I'd have put money on him to say he was going to win all 3 titles. The way he was putting up big numbers, big 12 and 13 and 10 dart legs. I mean, you go watch an individual put that out the first round of any event. Most of the time, and you go look at probably the odds betting, the bookies will say, hey man, that's the guy to pick. He's on fire. And for him to not run as deep in the event as I think he should have is tough. And I know it's tough on him, but any one of them, Ross Snook putting a perfect 501 game in. Like I said, if you look at individual performances throughout the weekend, there are tons of people that have bigger averages and better individual pocket performances throughout the weekend. I just somehow was able to just grind it out and make my way to the finals.
Yeah, we can clearly see that the standard is growing across the board in North America. And one game that I want to touch on from the weekend in particular, I'm sure you've been asked about it, is that first event, the semi-final against David Cameron. Drew quite a bit of attention from darts fans. 6-5 down in that race to 7. David Cameron looks like he's closing in on victory. You're way back in the leg, you're throwing 2 darts at a time in the board, and you end up winning that leg and then winning the decider. So just talk us through that moment and I guess the decision to throw those darts away.
Yeah, that's a tough conversation, but I knew it was going to come up. If you go back and actually look, I believe I was 5-3 and had the momentum. Felt good. I was scoring well. I was finishing well. Again, up 5-3 in a race to 7. And unfortunately, Dave had to use the restroom. So he asked the ref, asked me. I wasn't going to tell him no. And the ref probably wasn't going to tell him no. So Dave went and used the restroom. I tried to keep my momentum by practicing while he was at the restroom. It's different practicing rather than game momentum. It's just like calling a timeout in any professional sports. So he came back. Definitely a new, energized man, throwing 140s, 180s, shooting some big numbers, and I fell off. Obviously, I lost 3 on the trot to go down 6-5. So yeah, at that point where I just felt like the wind had got knocked out of me. I had nothing else to give. I'd given up on myself at that point, which, after the fact, I realized not only did I give up on myself, but I gave up on my family. I gave up on my sponsors. I gave up on all my supporters. And I started throwing darts away just because I wanted to get off stage. The way Dave was shooting, I didn't foresee him, when he was 200 points ahead of me, shooting at, I think, 40, and I was around the 250 mark. I didn't foresee him missing that many darts. So, yeah, I just threw a couple darts away. Very poor judgment on my part. very disrespectful for the sport. It just goes to show that even though you're down, you're never out. It's still up to your opponent to have to finish the game out, finish the leg out. And moving forward, you'll never see me do it ever again. Dave and I spoke after the match. He was frustrated, obviously, for missing that many doubles. I was frustrated with losing the momentum and giving up 3 legs on the trot. But then part of me was also happy that I was able to pull it out. And then I tried to just completely wash my brain of that match and go into the finals against Alex.
Certainly did that, and I was going to say, was anything said after that match, but it sounds like yourself internally you've learnt from that experience, and fair to say what you went on to achieve for the rest of the weekend is pretty remarkable, winning that title, winning the next 2 titles as well, and beating Alex Spellman in a couple of the finals, beating Jim Long in the last final as well. But we've got to mention as well your attire, because Peter Wright, he's one of my favourite players with the colourful shirts and the trousers. Instantly reminded me of him when I was watching you play, and I'm sure some of our listeners too. Did you take inspiration from him for your clothes, or did it come from something else?
So I used to wear really, really, really bright and crazy socks that would always match my bright and crazy shirt. But I always had either solid gray or solid black pants on. Until recently, about a couple years ago, let's just call it 4 years ago, I decided why not just, Peters is doing well. He's a unique, amazing world champion. Obviously, his character is perfect for the sport. So I decided that I would not necessarily go crazy with the style fancy wears, but just do some bright colors and try to get them in solid. So I shopped around, found some golf apparel that actually worked for me and matched with some of the custom jerseys that DJD had designed for me. So then I started matching pants with the custom shirts that he made, and still wear the crazy socks as well, and just kind of ran with it. And I've been doing it now for probably 3 years of wearing the colorful pants.
Good times. Well, we loved it, and we saw plenty of it at the weekend, and I'm sure we're going to see plenty more of it going forward. And one more before we let you go, because we're mindful we don't want you to miss your flight, but those 3 titles at the weekend, they've put you in contention for the World Championships, a trip over here to the UK, to Ali Pali in December. Have you started to dream now about possibly qualifying for the biggest tournament in darts, or are you trying to put that to one side and not get overexcited about what's possible now?
Honestly, I haven't even thought about it. I wouldn't have known that I wouldn't have known that I was in contention for that until Alex and Alex went to dinner with a couple other my teammates Saturday night with us after we played the Saturday event, and Alex is, we had shook off what happened Friday night because he's a professional by the up standards, the most standards. So we talked about it, and he's like, "Hey man, this puts you right into contention." I kind of laughed at it and was like, "Yeah, whatever. There's no way," because I thought I was way out, being down where I think I was ranked 13th or 14th going into the event. And then he was like, "Yeah, it may put you into contention for the World Cup team." I kind of laughed that off as well. So I haven't really. I just continue to keep we'll see. I still have 3 more events left in Indiana to either take the points lead or try to come in second, or let them fall where they fall. But as of right now, I'm not thinking about it. I have the DPFL this weekend, which is a big money prize tournament. So that's going to help me out. And then I have another tournament coming up afterwards that my daughter wants to go to for her 16th birthday. So I'm dedicating myself for that tournament. And then I have the Modus series coming up in November. First week in November, I'll be over in Portsmouth, England for the Modus series. So those are really the things that I'm concentrating on. Obviously, this puts me in contention for the Continental Cup. So I'll have that in October as well in New York. But I'm really not. I'm not thinking too hardly about the Worlds or the World Cup team currently.
Well, even without the Worlds or the World Cup, it sounds like it's going to be a busy rest of 2023. Stowe, it's a pleasure to get you on the show, talk to you about your weekend and your darts so far, and we wish you all the best for what else is to come this year as well.
I appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity. All right, so I'd like to give a couple shout outs to my sponsors, DJD, extreme darts, 9-dart out, beater dart guy, 717 darts, Defiance darts, bit of England, and of course my family, my daughter Layla, my son Stowe, my wife Crystal, my ex-wife Charity, who takes care of my kids when I'm all over the place, all my fans, also my supporters, and then my two biggest sponsors, L-Style and Shot Darts. So Joel from L-Style, thank you to everything you do for me, and Pete from Shot Darts, thanks for everything.
Shout out to all of them. Shout out to the Buntz family. Safe travels on your flight, and we wish you all the best for the weekend.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks again to Stowe for joining us, and we'll finish up the show with some listener questions. The mailbag is back, and the first question comes from ACW Darts, who says, how long do you think Rob Cross can keep this performance going?
I don't see a reason why he can't keep it going. His season's been building. It's still building. And we know he has a game that is levels above this. The peak was when he won the world title. But that entire year building up to it, he was better than he was these past 2 weekends. Better than he was when he won the Euro Tour this year. He's building back to where he was that year he broke through. And I think the hunger to re-establish himself as the world number 2 and maybe even push on to become world number 1 is back. And I think all of that makes him dangerous and makes him a force. He's not yet where he can get to and where he's been before. But I think he is on the path toward that. And if he remains hungry, if he remains focused, I think he'll continue like this for the rest of the year, and I think there's room for him to grow from here. The one thing I will add is, even compared to 6 years ago, even if he gets to where he was at his best, there are more players now who are also at that level, and that will make it more difficult. He was clearly the second best player in the world in 2017, behind only Michael Van Gerwen, and when push came to shove, when it mattered the most, he beat Michael Van Gerwen. Now, if he's even playing at that level, I think there's still three, maybe 4 players better than him, but not by much. And if he can get back to that and he's moving in that direction, that makes him a real force. So the answer is I don't see it stopping, and I think there's room to grow.
Yeah, it could well be a Rob Cross appreciation minute that is never ending for the rest of the year. We shall see. And I was just thinking back, you mentioned there about the hunger of Rob Cross as well, and I was thinking back to the first time that I spoke to Rob, and it was September 2016. So I think it was around about the time that he secured that tour card via the Challenge Tour. So before he was a world champion, before he'd even got onto the tour. And he was saying then that his dream was to be in the top 8, and like everyone else, it was to be world number 1. Well, he's ticked off a lot of things in darts. The world number 1 spot is something that is still on that list to be ticked off. Maybe with this newfound love that he's got for the game, this could be the time for him to do it. We know that he's capable of winning major titles, sometimes 2 in a year. We know he's capable of winning the biggest one there is, the World Championship. And many people will say to get to world number 1, you've got to have a World Championship title money on your order of merit from the last couple of years. So we'll see if he's able to get that world title back again. But yeah, I don't know how long he's going to keep this current run going for. I think in the current era, winning 2 titles in a row is tough doing, but to win 3, 4 or 5, I don't think we see that very often these days. So I do think the run will probably come to an end at some point over the next few weeks, whether he decides to play in the Players' Championships over the next few weeks, or maybe takes a little bit of a break after playing the World Series. He might decide to come back for the Euro Tour or the World Series finals. But yeah, I think we might not see a Rob Cross appreciation minute for the next few weeks, but I do think we are going to see 1 or 2 before the end of the year.
Second question comes from Elliot. What do you think the WDF circuit, the Modus League, and the Challenge Tour will look like in 5 years' time? And second question related to that, if a strong player could only play one of those 3, which would you suggest that they do?
Yeah, it's a cracking question, and one I think we should probably explore in more detail further down the line. We had a little bit of a glimpse into 2 of those, I want to call them organisations if you like, there's a better word for it, but 2 of the 3 of them last week when we had Paul Nicholson on to talk a little bit about the Modus, and we had Nick Rolls on to talk a little bit about the WDF. And starting with the Modus League, what Paul was saying to us last week in terms of the growth, where that's going to go going forward, he was leaning more towards the sort of players that are going to be involved. So looking beyond just the UK, looking into Europe, looking into Oceania, Australia, New Zealand, further afield, maybe North America as well, players getting involved from that area of the world coming over to play in the Modus League. So I think that's probably where we're going to see the growth of that. And 5 years down the line, I still think we'll see the Modus League, as long as there is that interest from, I think, first and foremost, the players, because players are queuing up to get in this event. We know our good friend Jamie Robinson wants to be involved. Lots of players want to be involved. And as long as there is that appetite for players to play in it, there's that following as well. People are watching it. They've got a good loyal core following watching it now as well. I can see the Modus League still being around in 5 years' time. The WDF, I said it a few weeks ago when we reacted to the World Masters being cancelled for this year. I do feel like it is a crucial 12 months coming up for them. There's a lot of work for them to do, and I think if they can get their ducks in a row, if you like, if they can get long-term deals for the World Masters, Lakeside, get that television coverage secure for a long period of time, get events back on the calendar. We've seen a few events cancelled this year, but get that stability on the calendar, then again, I think 5 years from now, I think we could see the WDF in a good position, because it's got a lot of potential. And let's not forget the small matter of darts in the Olympics. The WDF as one of the big bodies in darts worldwide, they're going to have a big say on that as well, getting that off the ground. So yeah, I'd like to think they'll still be a key player in darts as well. And lastly, the Challenge Tour. We've seen this year the prize money go up for that first time in a while. I think the big thing with the Challenge Tour is always talk about the structure. Been a lot of ideas floated around, and I think in 5 years' time the Challenge Tour will look different to how it looks now. But I think we're probably looking further towards those 5 years, not in the next year or two. I think it might be in 4 or 5 years' time we see a different Challenge Tour than what it is now. I'm not sure how that looks, but I think 5 years from now it will look different to how it looks now. And the last part of that question that we had there, I think it's tricky. I think a mix of all three is good, but I think your circumstances are going to dictate what you play in. And I think if you're looking for that stable 4, 5, 6 weekends in your calendar, you know you can map out your year. You are looking at the Challenge Tour, and to do that, you've got to go and play in Q School. So you play that, then you play the 4 or 5 weekends of the Challenge Tour. And again, you've got your 6 weekends of darts mapped out in the diary. You know those dates, they're not going to move around. You can get them booked in pretty early. So if you're looking for something that's going to be in the calendar already year in, year out, you're going to look at the Challenge Tour. Modus League, again, it's a little bit of who you know, isn't it? Sometimes getting an invite, or you've got to do well in certain events. So you've got to back yourself in that first hurdle to win an event, to get a spot in the Modus League. It's not that straightforward to play in that. The WDF, if I was a half decent player, I might be looking at this in terms of an option, because there's a bit more culture involved, isn't there? You're not just going to play in leisure centres or to play in Portsmouth in the Modus League studio with no one there. You're getting to travel around Europe, maybe other countries as well. You're getting to play in some of these big opens like the Dutch Open, and if you do well enough, play at Lakeside as well. So I think if I was a player in this position, I'd be looking for a bit more excitement, I guess, and getting to travel around, playing different events, go to different countries, and at the end of it, maybe play at the home of World Darts as well.
Well, don't undersell yourself. I think you're a half decent player. I mean, I would say 80 to 90 average is decent, and you're half of that.
Yeah, I did average 47 at the O2 once. Don't forget that.
Slightly above half decent then.
Come on.
The second part of the question, it's such a good question, but it's also at the same time such a bad question. I mean that in a good way, because they each offer something so different, and trying to figure out what is the best thing for a player is which factors are the best if you had to pick one is really challenging. But at the same time, why I say it's also therefore a bad question is because they offer such different things that if you only could play one, it's such a disadvantage. But it's a really interesting question, because the Modus League gives you that stage experience. The WDF circuit can as well, but it's, you have to get to the latter stages, or maybe you get selected at some of the bigger opens where they might have one of the matches, if they're streaming the entire thing, one match each round being streamed. But you might just get 1 or 2 stage matches if you're lucky across the weekend. While every single Modus Series event is on a stage and is on a stream, and that is really important if you're looking to progress, if you're looking to get to that next level. WDF, though, so many matches, and if you pick and choose your tournaments and you pick and choose your opens, you get a fairly good quality. You also get multiple tournaments that you can play a weekend, depending on which event it is. You might have an open, you might have a classic, the pairs events that you could do, so it's a lot of match experience you can get. And if you're good enough, if you get to those late stages, then you can get some, although not as much, stage experience. Well, the Challenge Tour is that real professional environment. It's preparing you to be on the Pro Tour, for playing those Players Championship events. Yes, you're playing 2 a day as opposed to 1 a day if you do make it onto the pros, but you're getting to play matches at a PDC level under PDC conditions. So they each offer something different, and that makes it such a tough question to decide which is the most important. I think it really depends on what the player is looking to do and where they are at their stage of their career. If they're really, one of those players who's just shy of being PDC caliber and wants that tour card, then Challenge Tour's the answer. If you're a player who's played PDC before, you're good enough, but you weren't able to take it to that next step as a PDC player, then maybe it's the Modus League, getting that stage experience so that if you get back into the PDC, playing those Euro Tour events, you're used to, because it's not the same with the Euro Tour crowd, but still you're getting those experience. But you can also get some of that on the on playing those WDF events, especially in front of more rowdy or louder crowds, as you'll need to get used to if you get onto the Euro Tour. So I don't know which I would say. I think it depends on the player. As far as where it is in 5 years, we talked a little bit with Paul Nicholson about that last week. I don't know, and I think I'm going to leave it at that. I'm curious to see where these go. I think the Challenge Tour eventually will try to get maybe up to 8 weekends. I think that will be the ideal spot for it, so that there's more opportunities, especially as the quality of players on it keep going up. I don't know where the Modus League goes next. I don't know where the WDF circuit goes. I want us to discuss it going forward, but I don't want to just make it guess because I really just don't have a clue.
And our last listener question comes from George Dobson. I think you're going to look forward to this one, Burton. He says, does Burton agree with Ollie Skymer, however you say his last name, that Borough are going down?
Anything else for this week? No. I mean, you looked at all the pundits at the start of the season were saying that, Borough were second favorite or third favorite. Second favorite would mean they're going up. Third favorite means they'd be the top seed entering the playoff. And I don't know if I agree. We got hot for a couple months last year, and we went from relegation fodder to an outside chance of reeling in Sheffield United and Luton for automatic promotion spot. When in the end we ended up in the playoffs and lost to Coventry because we just fell apart in the playoffs. But we struggled down the end of the season as well over the last 9 matches. We didn't look great. We looked okay. We looked maybe like the 10th best team in the division. I think we're better than last. I don't think we're going to finish 24th. I don't think we're going down. I think there's enough quality in the side. I didn't see the matches, which is why I think I can still say that, because I'm sure if I saw them, I wouldn't be thinking that. But I think we're where we were in the last few months of the season, which is I think we're going to end up where we were the last few months of the season, which is a slightly above mid-table team. The question is, can we bring in some more talent in January, and can we get out of this slide before it's too late? So I'm going to say no. I hope not, at least. Now, anything else for this week?
Well, I would say keep the faith with Middlesbrough. I'm going to keep the faith with Colchester. Things can only get better for both our teams. A few things just to say before we go. Thank you to our guests for joining us, to Robert and to Stowe. Thanks as well to our sponsor, Dartwolf. If you want more Dynamite darts content, head on over to dartwolf.tv. Give Dartwolf a follow on Twitter or X at Dartwolf180. And a special shout out as well to one of our listeners. I've been meaning to give him a shout out for a little while. This is the first time that we've done a a proper show together for a little while, but Matthew Edgar sent us a random DM. It was back in July saying, "Today I faced the biggest phobia of my life. I'm a huge needle phobic. 30 hours of treatment, tables, creams, and a physiologist there today to get through it. On top of that, I had sound cancelling headphones listening to the weekly Dartscast." There you go. If you're ever having to go through the needle treatment to get over that phobia, all you got to do is listen to the weekly Dartscast and we'll help you get through it as well. But to all of our other listeners that listen to us, big thank you as always for listening. We hope you've enjoyed the show, our regular show back as normal. We've got 4 months until Ali Pali, a little less than that until Lakeside. Plenty of events coming up before then, so it's an exciting time of the year for any darts fan. We can't wait to look ahead to all of it and also review it as well. So until then, enjoy the darts.
Until then, hang tight and then enjoy the darts. Now, just echoing everything you said, it's good that we had this little break. I hope we're both rejuvenated because you, all of our listeners, deserve to enjoy a lot of darts over the next few months, and there's going to be plenty of it to talk about. Keep your questions coming. I thought this was a great set of questions, despite making me talk about 24th place Middlesbrough. Maybe by the time you're listening, we'll have climbed to 23rd. And thank you for not bringing up the Women's World Cup this week. Granted, by the time our viewers are listening, who knows if they'll want to bring it up. But we'll be back next week to recap development tour and start looking ahead to the Players' Championship events at the end of the month, Euro Tour and everything next month. Lots of darts to talk about. Let us know if there's anything we should be talking about that we aren't, or that we shouldn't be talking about that we are. We want to hear from you. You know how to get in contact with us. Until then, hang tight.